I am very, very proud to be joined by my colleague from Alaska, Senator Murkowski. She has agreed to not make any size comparisons during the course of her remarks. And she and her husband, Vern, are going to have a terrific visit. They're going to speak here, and then go see Deepwater Wind, and then have a nice Rhode Island seafood dinner. And then with any luck, maybe I'll get them out sailing tomorrow morning before they have to go away. We'll show them what the Rhode Island coast looks like. Lisa has been in the Senate longer than I have. She came in 2002. She is a voter of Ketchikan, Alaska, which is kind of a great name for a place. We've got some good names here, but Ketchikan's pretty hard to top. One of the great political accomplishments that she made was after her defeat by a Tea Party opponent in the Alaska Republican primary, she won the general election as a write-in candidate on the general election ballot. Having to make sure that voters in far-flung villages, often still speaking their native language, often accessible only by air, knew how to write in Murkowski. And if I recall, you had to spell it right for it to count. So it was a truly impressive political achievement. She serves with Jack Reed on the Appropriations Committee. She is one of the senior appropriators. And one of the nice things about the Senate is how the Appropriations Committee has been working in a very solid bipartisan fashion to keep out each side's poison pill riders, to maintain a spirit of bipartisanship, and to produce budgets that have received very solid support in the House and in the Senate from Republicans and from Democrats. And it's because of the goodwill and the good capability of people like Jack and Senator Murkowski that takes place. What I love Lisa for most is that when I wanted to set up an Oceans Caucus, I figured very quickly that no state has more oceans than Alaska. And she is the chairman of the Energy Committee, so she has enormous clout in the United States Senate, and she very kindly agreed to be the co-founder of our Oceans Caucus. As I mentioned earlier, this year we crested with 38 bipartisan members. It's one of the bigger bipartisan caucuses. It's also one of the most effective ones. Senator Murkowski and I agreed very early on that we were going to take on 3 tasks. One would be pirate fishing, one would be marine plastic debris, and the other would be ocean data monitoring improvements. We got 4 treaties passed. That actually happened all on the same day, which was kind of remarkable because the previous 4 treaties were passed in the Senate over a span of 7 years. So we cleared 4 today, and then we cleared the Port States Measures Agreement, which was the legal basis for our participation in the International Pirate Fishing Treaty. And as you've seen, pirate fishing has been completely taken on in a new way since that bill passed, and there's an enormous amount of exciting new technology taking place to catch the pirate fishers and to try to shut down these so-called IUU fisheries. So we achieved a lot through this bipartisan Oceans Caucus in that. We then went on and passed the unanimous marine plastic debris bill, which, as I said, I think is going to clear the House by suspension on Tuesday of next week. It's scheduled to, so knock wood that that works. And we are in the final stages of an outline of a very significant ocean data monitoring bill, and if we can conclude the agreement on the outline, then we can go to legislation and try to use the same process that has been so productive before of having Republicans and Democrats work together through the Oceans Caucus to clear objections, explain things, and tee a significant piece of legislation up to pass in the Senate by unanimous consent. That is what we've been able to do. She is a person of great courage, of great dignity, of great clout in the Senate, and someone who cares enormously about oceans and climate and the issues that we share. There's a difference of scale between Alaska and Rhode Island. This will be the last time we talk about that. But the issues are very, very similar. So please give a very, very warm welcome to my friend Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska.
We'll see how it is at the end. Now, Sheldon, you did not tell me that I could not do size. I'm just saying, he didn't tell me that that was off the table. So.
There goes all your material.
There goes all the material. Thank you. This is indeed an opportunity. I have never been to Rhode Island, so this is my inaugural visit, so thank you very much. Beautiful day, it was beautiful flying in. I have to tell you that typically on a summer schedule, if it's a weekend that I am scheduled to go home, I would leave Washington National about the same time that I left to come here to Providence this morning. The difference is that it's 11 hours to get me back home. So I can come here, put in a full day work, and I would still not be landing in Anchorage at the end of my day here. So I'm not going to talk about size. I will talk a little bit about geography here, but I do want to take this opportunity because I'm looking at this as this is my chance to learn more about what Rhode Islanders face when it comes to energy, the environment, our common oceans. But also, because I have the microphone and the podium here for a few moments this afternoon, it's also an opportunity for me to help share some of the place that I am so passionate and fond about and what allows me to be such an advocate for our oceans, for our environment, and for Alaska. So I do want to start with size, because size matters. I'm just going to share with you why it matters. We're big, let's just face it, we're big. We're California, Texas, and Montana all belong together, that's Alaska, okay? 1/5 the size of the United States of America. We stretch from the East Coast to the West Coast, from the Gulf to the top. Sheldon's shaking his head saying that's not true, but it is true. It is true. And the municipality where Vern and I live, the municipality of Anchorage, I'm told, is the same size as the state of Rhode Island. So that helped me put it into perspective a little bit more. And to just put it more in context, one of the glaciers that I'm going to be out on conducting a wedding in a couple of weeks, the Malaspina Glacier, is the size of the state of Rhode Island. So, I get off the airplane in Sheldon. I see this big poster with this huge, enormous, ginormous pumpkin. And it says, biggest pumpkin in the country. And I'm like, no. We got Rhode Island beat. We got big pumpkins. We grow huge pumpkins because it's, it's broad daylight during the summertime. And you know what? You guys beat us by like 700 pounds. The biggest pumpkin is 2,260 pounds. Wow. That's enough of the jokes. Stop it. But one of the reasons why I'm going to go on with why I think size does matter, because it does have a bearing on how things operate in Alaska. We're big, but one about 63% of our state is held in federal lands, whether it is Forest Service lands, Park Service, refuge, BLM, and it's significant because that has impact on how we're able to access parts of the state, transportation corridors, economic development, and so that really does play in. And so we did look to see, in terms of the federal lands here in Rhode Island, I'm told it's about 4,410 acres. We've got about 224 million acres. So we've got 51,000 times more, which in my mind is like 51,000 more reasons why my job is so complicated. So when Jack Reed was ranking on Interior, we've got the oversight of all of our, basically the land management agencies, and as well as wonderful things like the Smithsonian's and National Endowment of the Arts and the Humanities and some of those great programs. Also, Native Issues, Indian Health Service, BIA. And Jack says to me, Lisa, on the interior stuff where it comes to the public lands, why did you handle that side of the portfolio? Because I'm just not that caught up in it on the Rhode Island side. But it does have bearing, again, in terms of how you are able to access and how you are able to operate. Some of you may have been to my great state. I thank you for that. We welcome you back, and we'll take anybody else who wants to come up. If you've been to any of our cities, Ketchikan, Fairbanks, Anchorage, you'll say, well, it's got everything that we would have here in terms of the roads and the hospitals and public safety and communication. But our state is challenged in many ways. Again, because we are so big, we've got a lot of geography between communities. 720,000 people, 80% of the communities are not connected by a road. That means they're not connected by a bridge either. That means they're really not connected. They may be connected by a river in the summer. That's great. In the wintertime, the river freezes over. You're able to move that way. And when you think about how you move about in a place where you don't have a transportation grid, think about also how you stay warm in a cold place when you don't have an energy grid. When you don't have an energy grid, when everybody's kind of got their own little energy grid, that's kind of what we're dealing with in Alaska. Give you a quick little example of a community by the name of whales. Not whales that swim in the water, but whales like over in Europe. And small little community, about 150 people, right on the Bering Straits. And USA Today went out to visit Wales a couple of years ago, and they had some pretty interesting observations about how hard life was in that community. But the comment from USA Today was, they stepped out, they said it felt a lot like stepping back in time, with some caveats. Most people lack running water inside their homes, which means they use honey buckets for toilets, carrying them outside to be emptied into a disposal lagoon. Hunters eat bowhead whale, walrus oil, and reindeer. On the other hand, as many as 6 small planes a day land at that gravel airstrip, carrying in basically anything Amazon sells if you're willing to pay for it. So, a world that is the old and the new, feet in really 2 different times. And so when you look at the Alaska reality TV shows, I want you to just keep in mind that what you may be seeing may be one part of Alaska, but that there are other sides that are quite unique and quite different. So back to Rhode Island. Clear differences in size, but what brings us together is this ocean piece. This great ocean piece. And I don't care how many miles of coastline you have, big or small. The fact is that our oceans are this common connector here. And I am very, very proud of what Senator Whitehouse and I have worked on within the Oceans Caucus. And he has outlined several of the legislative initiatives that we have advanced. When we first formed this, he says, well, what do you think we should take up first? And we discussed various ideas, and I said, hey, what about ocean acidification? And I remember your look. He says, I thought we kind of agreed that we would stay away from things that are controversial. And I said, maybe controversial, but it's the reality. And it has impact on a state like mine. It has impact on our fishermen. It has impact on those who access our waters. We need to try to understand it. So our very first Oceans Caucus was a oversight, if you will, on what was going on with oceans acidification. And since then, the work that we've been doing to focus on marine debris, especially the plastic pollution, illegal fishing. So the work that's gone on to this point in time, the Save Our Seas Act, which allows NOAA to declare severe marine debris events, fund cleanup, fund response efforts, allows governors to request declarations rather than having agencies take the lead. We reauthorized the marine debris program to kind of identify where it is coming from, steps for cleanup, ways to keep it from happening. But the issues as they relate to marine debris, I think we recognize, we've certainly seen it firsthand in Alaska when Fukushima happened and the catastrophe from that tsunami was truly swept out to sea. Where did it end up? It ended up on Alaska's shores. I was actually able to be part of an exchange of a soccer ball from a young boy, a middle schooler, who lived in the community of Raccoon, I can't say it. It's a long word with an R and an I and a K and a T and a Z in it. But to be able to go back over there and to return that soccer ball to him and was a reminder that, again, the connection that the ocean makes is a wonderful connection. But when it delivers debris, as we know and we face, what we can be doing together to address this is a responsibility of all. We have made great gains, truly, with the legislation that we've been able to enact with the Illegal, Unreported, and Unregulated Fishing Enforcement Act, this IUU. I think it has been significant. I think to a certain extent it's been historic, and it has been an example, again, of how and why bipartisanship in the Senate is necessary. These are not Republican issues. These are not issues that are viewed as Democrat issues. These are issues that we all care about. And so how we all come together to help address them is the challenge to us. The ocean data issue that Senator Whitehouse has brought up is, I think, incredibly key for us now. This is where we're putting a lot of our efforts into determining the role that ocean data and observations play in supporting marine transportation, energy development, tourism, or fisheries, the opportunity to discuss the blue economy with a focus on what we can do towards safe operations, efficient operations, sustainability on the oceans and in our coastlines. But bottom line with all of this is information. We need to have more information about our oceans. We know more about outer space than we do about our own oceans. And right now the president is all excited about the Space Force. You know what? I am not. It's not that I am not excited about space, but until we focus more attention on the life-giving oceans, then we can maybe do a little bit more. But right now, The mapping of the moon is more precise than the mapping of our seafloor. This is our planet. We don't know what's going on down there. Up in the Arctic, in my world, only 4% of Alaska's Arctic has been charted to modern standards. Now think about that. You are a mariner, Senator Whitehouse. Some of the charts and the depth soundings that we are relying on in Alaska date back to the days of Captain Cook, where a line with a lead was dropped to the bottom, measured it, and that was the marker. We are still using that. You know what happens? Ships run into things. Not a good outcome. So, we have so much more that we can and must be doing when it comes to our oceans data. And recognizing that, again, this is something where there is truly common ground. There is no reason out there that we should not be doing more to help advance those initiatives. Now, we're talking about energy, environment, and oceans. And I want to talk a little bit about climate and how climate fits in. Because if you have done any background on me, you know that not only do I come from the state of Alaska, but that I have been one that has been a strong supporter of our energy development in Alaska, specifically our oil and our gas. And I have been proud to do that in a responsible way, an environmentally responsible way, in a way that allows for our state's economy to grow, in a way that allows our nation to be less dependent on others. But I also am one who believes very strongly that we must do more when it comes to reducing our level of emissions in this country and around the globe. I want to find those practical, those real solutions that are out there, because I want to ensure that the Malaspina Glacier is always going to be bigger than Rhode Island. And I say that not as a joke, because it is not a joke. Climate change is not some hypothetical. It's not somebody's theory out there. It's not something that can be ignored. We, in the Arctic, are on the front lines. We are seeing and we're feeling the effects of climate change, and we're doing so probably more immediately than the rest of the country. And I have heard very clearly my friend and the warnings that he has repeated and what you see back here. But let me share with you, I come from a state where 85%, nearly 85% of our state is covered with some level of permafrost. In other words, soil that at some depth below the surface is permanently or at least seasonally frozen or in a hardened state. And as we're seeing temperature changes, and this is not a 10-degree change, but a 2-degree change, a 1-degree change is considerable. And what happens when that happens? Well, that begins to thaw. And when it starts to thaw, think about what then happens to whatever may be on it. If it is a road and the soil is starting to thaw, your road starts to get little heaves, we call them frost heaves. Or your airstrip, which may have been a perfectly good airstrip, now has some bumps that perhaps don't make it safe. You have a water and sewer line that may now be less stable. So we see that. It's very slow, but we see it. But what we see perhaps most notably is the sea ice that is receding So the multi-year ice, which is the ice that really just doesn't break down, that there's less and less of that. There's more single-year ice that is able to break up, or perhaps it doesn't form all the way. And there's just greater space between the land and the ice. And when there's greater space out there, that means it's water. And in the winter, there are storms. And the storms whip up this area that allow for levels of wave activity. And the waves then come to the shore, causing coastal erosion that is threatening villages, threatening homes, threatening infrastructure. And we see that, and it is very real, it is very tangible. And so how we address the impact of climate change is a direct challenge to us. And again, to go back to geography for just a moment. Think about this huge state going from one end of the country literally to the other. And I mentioned that 80% of our communities are not connected by road. About 200 of our rural villages are not connected to any form of an energy grid. So you say, well, how do they keep warm? Unfortunately, far too many are still fueled and powered by diesel. In your home, you have home heat, you have stove oil that's keeping you warm. Diesel is creating the power for electricity. And this diesel is not cheap. If you're upriver in the Yukon, you might get your fuel twice a year. Think about that. Think about being a community of, say, 400, 500 people, and twice a year you get your fuel. Twice a year you get your fuel, so you got to gauge it right. But what happens if it's a cold winter and you don't gauge it right? And you're out, and it's 60 below. People need to stay warm. What we do is we fly it in a small airplane, 50 gallons at a time. Think about what that costs you. You're paying $5 to $10 a gallon for home heating fuel, maybe the same price for diesel. Some of the villages in my state pay more than $1 a kilowatt hour. Not very sustainable. So as we think about the solutions, as we think about how we're going to deal with the impacts, what are we going to do to reduce the cost of emissions? Some say that the most immediate thing that we can do is we can increase the price of our energy. Well, for the folks that are in the villages that are paying over $1 a kilowatt hour, paying $8 for home heating fuel to keep warm, if I go home and I say, I'm going to have to increase the price that you're paying, these are the most energy insecure in our country, so many of them. So how we look to the solutions, is where we are challenged to be the greatest innovators. And this is a place where I'm so proud of Alaskans, because you know of our pipeline. You know of our Trans-Alaska pipeline, that big 800-mile pipeline that's been delivering oil for 40 plus years. What you might not know is how Alaska has been a leader in renewables, and how we are integrating them into making changes that are dramatic and substantive. We're doing it all over. We are a state that gets about 25%, we're about 25% renewable because of our small hydro, and we have an opportunity to do a lot more. But what we've been able to do in some of these communities where your energy costs are so high and you don't think you have any options, well, you look around and you're thinking, flying it in, that's not cutting it. We don't like the diesel. It's stinky, it's environmentally bad, and it's loud. What do we have? We have wind. So you take a town like Quigillingok, try saying that instead of Ketchikan, Quigillingok, population of about 350 people. Give them 3 wind turbines. They got some little clay heaters on the inside of some of the homes, and they have a little storage shed looks like, it just looks like a shed, and you open the door and there's a racks, looks like Costco racks with Chevy Volt batteries. And when the wind is blowing, all you can hear is just the clip, clip, clip of the wind because the diesel generators are off. Quig can be 100% renewable for like 3 days. And then, then you have to bring diesel back on, but it is making a difference. Kodiak, an island community, second largest fishing port by volume in the country here. And they are almost 100% renewable. Between the hydro that they have, between the wind that they have, the batteries and the flywheels. We took Secretary Perry out to look at that. Couldn't believe what he was seeing and how we have integrated all of that. That community saves 13 million gallons of diesel every year, worth about $40 million to the community. So it is significant, it is real, and we're doing it every day. You have other little communities that are bringing on small hydro. You have schools that are using woody biomass to heat the schools. It allows them to have greenhouses during the wintertime so that they can grow produce. Otherwise, they're not able to afford lettuce. You think about the changes that can come through the innovation and the pioneering. We're doing more with microgrids in the state of Alaska than anywhere else in the world right now, and nobody really knows about it. So if you want to have a great field trip, come up to Alaska and see what we're doing with microgrids. See how we are pioneering and innovating in ways that are not quite yet making the news, but you're going to start hearing about them. And you can say, hey, I was at that thing that Sheldon does, and Lisa said. It is exciting, and I am excited about it. So thank you for the opportunity to be here in your state. As Sheldon mentioned, I'm going to have an opportunity this afternoon to go out to the Block Island wind farm, and I was making a comment earlier that I think is worth sharing. I think this says a lot for you. I'm chairman of the Energy Committee. I'm paying attention to what's going on with energy innovation all over. And every time I hear about offshore wind, it's about what is not happening in offshore. And then when I commit to come here and realize that you have your own offshore wind that has been operating now for a couple of years without making headlines in the national news, it says a lot about how you have come together to determine the success of a project like this. When you can bring on a 5-turbine, 30-megawatt wind farm and do that without some of the controversies that we've seen in other places, I think that you must be doing something right there. So I'm going to go figure out what it is that you have done. I'm told that you got some mansions here, but I think it's much more interesting looking at wind farms. And I'm hoping that will further my education. But thank you for the opportunity to not only encourage you in what you are doing as we care for our oceans, as we care for our environment, as we focus on energy, innovation, and solutions, but in understanding what happens at the other end of that country. 11 hours from now, I'll be there, but thank you for the opportunity to be with you here today.
We have time for just 2 questions. Janet?
Senator, welcome. I've heard such wonderful things about you from Senator Whitehouse and Senator Reid, and Dr. Michael Mann called you a hero at one of the keynotes earlier today. Thank you. And as you know, Kelly Donnelly, your wonderful counsel, and I worked for Senator John Chafee for many years, who was also a Republican who was a leader on the environment and was seeking bipartisan solutions. So my question is, we also feel like we're on the front lines because of being a coastal state and are concerned about sea level rise and ocean acidification and erosion. So given the cost of inaction, as we see our communities degrade and deteriorate, as an appropriator, what can you do, what can we do to pay the considerable costs of mitigation, conservation, restoration, retrofitting, and all the things we need to do to make our coasts resilient?
It's a challenging issue, and there's a challenging response, because I think we all recognize that when we talk about coastal resilience, how we can be more resilient, how we can adapt, how we can mitigate. There's no specifics as to this is what it looks like in every place, and it's the same thing, and therefore all we need to do is build a big seawall around the country. Don't go there with a seawall. It is not. Okay. Folks in the back, they didn't get it. But my point is there's no one thing, so how do we address it? And I'll share with you some of the dilemma that we face from an Alaska situation. We have identified in our state those coastal communities that are most threatened from the coastal erosion, and it's a significant list. There's about a dozen that are in need of relocation, not just shoring things up, but actual relocation. We're in the process right now of helping to relocate one community, the community of Newtalk. Newtalk has just a couple hundred people, but to move that village is over $100 million. And so you think about that and say, well, that's just not possible. How do you do that? Why don't those people move? Well, when you talk to people that have lived in a region, in an area, not just for 100 years, not just since the founding of the country, but since time immemorial, we have a different conversation about that. And so we are working to help the people of Newtalk, but it has been exceptionally, horribly difficult to try to piece together the resources to help that one community. And those are the ones that are most threatened currently. What do you do about a community whose water infrastructure is threatened? Because right now, Barrow, Reykjavik, which is at the top of the world, is the community that we call it, their water and sewer is threatened because of the fall storms that are now able to kind of come over the road, threaten the infrastructure, threaten the water lagoon. And so we're in conversation about what do we do? How do we keep the ocean out? How do we keep the storms out? Where do we move the infrastructure to? And these are things that you can see. Move a village, move water infrastructure. And think about some of the other things, and I know you've got some breakout sessions this afternoon that are focused on things like the health impacts of climate change. That's a broader thing. How do we address that? So this is bigger than any one solution. This is bigger than one committee, one appropriation. It is a recognition that we are dealing with forces that go beyond one initiative, that go beyond one solution, one legislation, one bill, one approach. And so thinking more broadly about how we are able to address is important. We are working to build legislation that would help us with understanding how we not only address the issue of resilience, but how we identify where the significant threats are and how we can be more resilient as communities. Some of it is building smart, but some of it, as I mentioned, is dealing with the reality of where it is today and how do we address that. So your question doesn't have a simple answer. You knew that before you asked it, but that's why discussions like that which Senator Whitehouse is leading are important. That's why it's important, I think, to have a voice like mine from a long ways away on the other side of the country, but facing similar but different challenges. Why we need to have these open, shared conversations, dialogue about difficult issues so that we can come together with reasonable solutions. Thanks, Jen.
Babalu?
Hi, Senator. Welcome to Rhode Island, and thank you for your leadership on so many issues of major importance to Rhode Island. We really appreciate that, including marine fisheries. And speaking of marine fisheries, as you know, the House recently passed a Magnuson-Stevens Act reauthorization bill with mixed views as to whether the bill would improve the act by affording more flexibility to the regional fishery management councils or weaken the act by loosening the requirements to conserve and rebuild fish stocks. What's your take on a Senate Magnuson-Stevens reauthorization bill, and what are your thoughts on the major issues that need to be addressed?
Well, thank you for bringing it up. It is an issue that we are, of course, engaged in heavily in Alaska. It was Senator Ted Stevens, along with Warren Magnuson, that built that legacy law that really brought about a level of conservation for our fisheries that has allowed them to be as strong as they are today. In Alaska, we're very, very proud. Our North Pacific Fisheries Management Council is viewed as kind of the gold standard. We have remarkably strong and sustainable fisheries, and we're very proud of that, but it didn't come about by accident. We have had our share of struggles, and believe you me, we have our share of debates going back and forth between commercial and recreational and subsistence. But at the end of the day, the common desire is not to, I want to take the fish so that I have it today. It's what do we do to make sure that we all have access to the resource going forward, and finding that balance. So reauthorization of Magnuson-Stevens is very important. We're keeping a very close eye on it. I'm not on the Commerce Committee, but my colleague, Senator Sullivan from Alaska, is on that committee, and he is chair of the subcommittee that is doing the review and building out the Senate response on Magnuson-Stevens. I think it's fair to say that the House bill is not viewed, I don't want to say not viewed favorably, but it is not going to be embraced by the Senate and we'll just put our mark on it and move it out. It's very clear that the Senate will advance its own bill based on what I've seen from the House and what Senator Sullivan and I have discussed over the years here. I think you will see a different bill coming out of the Senate. I certainly hope you will see a different bill coming out of the Senate. I understand. I come from a state where it's all about fish. We became a state. We were the 49th state to enter the Union close to 60 years ago because of our fisheries. It was about taking back management of our fisheries from the federal government that led to the fight to statehood. So making sure that we're doing right by our fisheries is absolutely key and paramount to what we're doing. But we cannot have a situation where you put conservation to the side so that we can have more short-term gain for a specific fishery. I mentioned in my comments that one of the things that I am very proud to be working with Senator Whitehouse on right now is doing more with our data and the research and the collection that comes with our oceans, and that's also understanding our fisheries. So we have to be smart with this reauthorization, and there's a lot of competing interests out there, but I think we need to remember that it is about the resource and the sustainability of the resource. There's a lot of users, and there's more users now than when Stevens and Magnuson put that act together. But more than ever, our oceans are threatened and our fisheries are threatened. And so making sure that we do right with strong conservation measures so that our fisheries will be sound going forward for generations to come. That's the order here. So I'm okay taking a little bit longer in getting it right. And it needs to work not just in the North Pacific for our fisheries. It needs to work for your fisheries here on the Atlantic side too. So I hope that there is a lot of input and collaboration as we work forward on that one. Thanks for that question.